Hotel family. This your brother, the chosen few, aka Aaron Poole, aka Matthew Daniels, and y'all see the title of this one. This is going to be Gilgamesh and Noah. Are these flood stories the same? What I'm going to be doing in this video, I'm going to be addressing some of the similarities between the flood story found within the Epic of Gilgamesh and the flood story found within the Bible, known as Noah's Ark. Okay, so uh, right. So just a little backdrop. I don't really want to take too long. Um, the Epic of Gilgamesh was written around 2100 BCE. Okay, and it is claimed that Gilgamesh was actually a king in the Mesopotamian region of a city called U-R-U-K, I believe, Uruk. Okay. And they claim that shortly after his death, stories about him were written. Now, these stories about him were written with like a mythological context to them. There are obvious things within these stories that aren't true or that aren't actually factual, but they say that Gilgamesh himself was actually a real historical king. Now, some of you may have heard about the Epic of Gilgamesh when people briefly talk about the flood stories of the Mesopotamian region and other flood stories in the world that may or may not have similarities with the story in the Bible known as Noah's Ark. But you may not have ever read it, or you may not have too much knowledge about it. So what I'm going to do with this, I'm not going to read the entire story. I'm just going to read a few parts. I'm going to tell you a little background about it, and I'm going to read a few parts in it just to get you familiar with the story. And then I'm going to show you some comparisons within the flood story found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I'm going to compare it to some verses in the Bible. Now, the first thing I want you to know is Gilgamesh, the king, was not a part of the flood story. What you have is the Epic of Gilgamesh, in my opinion, it's ultimately talking about how Gilgamesh was a powerful and strong and warrior type of ruler. But for all of his strength and for all of his skills and for all of his abilities, he was distraught because he realized that he was still going to die. He had a best friend named Enkidu, and when Enkidu died, it made Gilgamesh more aware of his own mortality. And he mourned and mourned and mourned the death of his friend, and it made him think about his own death. And so he had heard the stories of a man named, I don't want to pronounce it wrong, Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim, you'll see it written in the text here shortly, who had obtained immortality. And so Gilgamesh went on a journey to find Utnapishtim in order to find out how this man obtained immortality. Now, it was this Utnapishtim who would be the Noah figure in the flood story found within the Epic of Gilgamesh. So, like I said, you have in the story, Gilgamesh, he just building up to it. He goes on a journey to find a man who survived the flood to ask of him how he attained his immortality. Now, I'm not going to read through all of the portions of the book leading up to when he actually gets to Utnapishtim, but I'm going to start reading there. Okay, just to give you a little background. Okay, so as you see right here, we're gonna start. We're just gonna read a little bit. Okay, it says Utnapishtim, who joined the assembly of the gods and was granted eternal life. Basically, it is beginning at where I'm starting the story at, when Gilgamesh had finally found him. So Utnapishtim said, "Why are your cheeks so hollow? Why is your face so ravaged, frosted, and burnt by the desert sun? Why is there so much grief in your heart? Why are you worn out and ready to collapse, like someone who has been on a long, hard journey?" Gilgamesh said, "Shouldn't my cheeks be hollow? Shouldn't my face be ravaged, frost chilled, and burnt by the desert sun? Shouldn't my heart be filled with grief? Shouldn't I be worn out and ready to collapse? My friend, my brother, whom I loved so dearly, who accompanied me through every danger, Enkidu, my brother, whom I loved so dearly, who accompanied me through every danger. The fate of mankind has overwhelmed him. For 6 days I would not let him be buried, thinking, if my grief is violent enough, perhaps he will come back to life again. For 6 days and 7 nights I mourned him, until a maggot fell out of his nose. Then I was frightened. I was terrified by death, and I set out to roam the wilderness. I cannot bear what happened to my friend. I cannot bear what happened to Enkidu. So I roamed the wilderness in my grief. How can my mind have any rest? My beloved friend has turned into clay. My beloved Enkidu has turned into clay. And won't I too lie down in the dirt like him and never arise again? That is why I must find Utnapishtim, whom men call the distant one. I must ask him how he managed to overcome death. I have wandered the world, climbed the most treacherous mountains, crossed deserts, sailed the vast ocean, and sweet sleep has rarely softened my face. I have worn myself out through careless striving. I have filled my muscles with pain and anguish. I have killed bear, lion, hyena, leopard, tiger, deer, antelope, ibex. I have eaten their meat and have wrapped their rough skins around me. And what in the end have I achieved? When I reached Shaduri, the tavern keeper, I was filthy, exhausted, heartsick. Now let the gate of sorrow be closed behind me, and let it be sealed shut with torn pitch. Utnapishtim said, Gilgamesh, why prolong your grief? Have you ever paused to compare your own blessed lot with the fool's? And now I'm going to stop reading right there just briefly. And Utnapishtim basically goes on to tell Gilgamesh why is he wasting time being worried about how he's going to die. Being a king, he has way more than other men and other women who will live and die just like him. So why is he wasting time? Why is he wasting time? Okay, being worried about death. The only thing that he is doing is bringing death closer by being worried about death. So on the left-hand side, let's start at that bottom paragraph once again. It says, Utnapishtim said, Gilgamesh, why prolong your grief? Have you ever paused to compare your own blessed lot with the fool's? You were made from the flesh of both gods and humans. The gods have lavished you with their gifts, as though they were your fathers and mothers. From your birth, they assigned you a throne and told you, rule over men. To the fool, they gave beer dregs instead of butter, stale crust instead of bread that is fit for gods, rags instead of magnificent garments, instead of a wide fringed belt and an old rope, and a frantic, senseless, dissatisfied mind. Can't you see how fortunate you are? You have worn yourself out through ceaseless striving. You have filled your muscles with pain and anguish. And what have you achieved but to bring yourself one day nearer to the end of your days? At night, the moon travels across the sky. The gods of heaven stay awake and watch us, unsleeping, undying. This is the way of the world. Wait, this is the way the world is established from ancient times. And so they basically continue their conversation on these 2 pages. You can pause and read it if you like, but I'm going to just go ahead and go to this part. If you notice, I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to read what I just skipped. I'm just going to start right here where it says, Gilgamesh said unto Utnapishtim, I imagined that you would look like a god, but you look like me. You are not any different. I intended to fight you. Yet now that I stand before you, now that I see who you are, I can't fight. Something is holding me back. Tell me, how is it that you, a mortal, overcame death and joined the assembly of the gods and were granted eternal life? So it is here that we're going to get into the story of the flood, because Utnapishtim attained eternal life after surviving a great deluge. Okay. And when he tells this story of how this flood happened, that he survived, it is here that we will see the similarities between the flood within the Epic of Gilgamesh and the flood found in the Bible. Utnapishtim said, I will tell you a mystery, a secret of the gods. You know Sharupak, that ancient city on the Euphrates. I lived there once. I was its king once, a long time ago. When the great gods decided to send the flood, 5 gods decided, and they took an oath to keep the plan secret. Stop right there. I want you to notice something. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, I have it underlined that the great gods decided to send the flood. And this is where I'm going to start my correlation with the Bible, because in the Bible, Genesis chapter 6, verse 5 through 7, it tells you that in the Bible also, it was God who decided to send the flood. Okay, now that may seem small, but just flow with me. And the Bible says, and God saw that the wickedness, hold on, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repented me that I have made them. And in the Bible, God decides to do this with a flood. So key point. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, it is the gods that decide to send a flood to wipe out humanity and animals. Okay. And in the Bible, in Noah's flood, just as in Utnapishtim's flood, it is God who decides to send a flood to kill man and to kill the animals. Now, if you um look down to the other underlined part that I have in the Epic of Gilgamesh on the left hand side of your page, it says, King of Sharupak, quickly, quickly, tear down your house and build a great ship. Leave your possessions, save your life. The ship must be square so that its length equals its width. Build a roof over it, just as the great deep is covered by the earth. Then gather and take aboard the ship examples of every living creature. So in the Epic of Gilgamesh, with Utnapishtim's flood, we see that Utnapishtim is directed to build a great ship, right? And he's instructed to take aboard this ship with himself examples of every living creature. So I want you to look to the right side of the screen, the scriptures that I have at the bottom. Now, this is Genesis Also chapter 6. Okay. And I want you to look at verse 14. It says, make thee an ark of gopher wood, rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. So the ark is a ship. So Noah is being instructed to build a ship in lieu of this flood, just like Utnapishtim is told to build a ship in lieu of his flood. Now look down at verse 17, family. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I but with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons, and thy wife and thy sons' wives with thee. Verse 19. And of every living thing of all flesh, two of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. Verse 20. Of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, two of every sort shall come unto thee to keep them alive. So Noah is instructed to build a ship, and he is instructed to bring two of every kind of animal on the ship with him. Utnapishtim is instructed to build a ship, and he is instructed to bring examples of every living creature aboard the ship with him. Okay? God decides to send a flood in both stories. Utnapishtim and Noah is instructed to build a ship in both stories. And Utnapishtim and Noah are both instructed to bring examples of every living creature on the ship with them. Okay. Um, next part. This I'm not going to read. You can pause if you like. I'm not going to read all of it, but I want to just highlight that in both stories, it goes on to explain how the ship is to be built and the process that Utnapishtim and Noah go through to create their various ships. And I just put this because this is the next page in the story of the Epic of Gilgamesh. So I knew if someone wanted to actually read the story, they could pause it and they could have a look at it. But the only thing that I want to highlight here is the on the left hand side in the Epic of Gilgamesh, that first sentence, how it says, I understood Ea's words, and I said, my Lord, I will obey your command exactly as you have spoken. That's Utnapishtim speaking, saying that he has heard the words, he has heard the command, and he will obey and do as he is told. He will build a ship, and he will bring examples of every living creature on the ship. Now, if you look on the right hand side, toward the bottom, verse 22 that I have underlined, it says, thus did Noah according to all that God commanded him, so did he. So now we have in both stories, both individuals, we have in both the stories, both individuals are agreeing to build the ship. Okay. So y'all can take a look at that if you like. Just a second. All right. And this, you can read this if you like. I just included this just for documentation's sake. This is more, this is the next page in the story explaining how Utnapishtim built and designed his boat in his story. But I'm not going to stay on that. I want to kind of get through this. Okay, so if you notice, on the left-hand side, the underlined portion, back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, it says, then Shamash announced that the time had come. Enter the ship now, seal the hatch. I gazed at the sky. It was terrifying. I entered the ship. So now that we see the flood waters coming, and we see Utnapishtim entering the ship and the seal being hatched. Small point, but it's still a matter with the a similarity between the stories. You can see on the right hand side, this is still in Genesis, okay? And it is still chapter, no, it's no longer chapter 6, excuse me, but it's chapter 7, verse 15. It says, and they went in unto Noah into the ark, two and two of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And they that went in, male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. Okay, into the ship now, seal the hatch. And they went in, male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. Okay, so now they're on the ship, right? Now check this out. Check this out, family. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, it says, at the first glow of dawn, an immense black cloud rose on the horizon across the sky. Inside it, the storm god Adad was thundering, while Shalat and Hanish, twin gods of destruction, went first, tearing through mountains and valleys. Nergal, the god of pestilence, ripped out the dams of the great deep. Ninurta opened the floodgates of heaven. The infernal gods blazed and set the whole land on fire. Now, in the Bible, to the right, this is Genesis chapter chapter 7, verse 11, right? It says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were open, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Look at the language. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, it says, the god of pestilence, ripped out the dams of the great deep. In the Bible, it says, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up. In Epic of Gilgamesh, Ninurta opened the floodgates of heaven. In the Bible, and the windows of heaven were open. Right? The same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. Nergal, the god of pestilence, ripped out the dams of the great deep. Ninurta opened the floodgates of heaven. All right. And we're not going to tear up on the coast. I just want to show. I just want to do a video real quick to show some of these similarities. Okay. If you'd like to just see how the story progresses, you can pause the video here, read this particular page, and see what happens next. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to keep it moving. I don't want it to be no hour-long video. I just want to show some similarities. All right. Now, check this out, family. Okay, check this out. In the Epic of Gilgamesh with Utnapishtim, the underlying portion, it says, no land could be seen, just water on all sides, as flat as a roof. There was no life at all. The human race had turned to clay. Okay, now if you look on the right side at the very top, we're still in Genesis chapter 7, verse 19. It says, and the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of the fowl and of the cattle and of the beast and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land died. So you have no land being able to be seen, the entire world being covered, and no life at all remaining. Okay, you see that in both stories. Now, scroll down on the Epic of Gilgamesh side to the next underlying portion where it says, on Mount Nimush, the ship ran aground. The mountain held it and would not release it. Now, look on the right hand side. And we have in Genesis chapter 8, verse 4, and the ark rested in the seventh month on the 17th day of the month upon the mountains of Ararat. So in Utnapishtim's flood, his his ship comes to rest on a mountain. And in the flood of Noah, Noah's ship comes to rest on a mountain, right? Now get this. There's even more similarity because you're going to notice in the Bible, it talks about what? If you're familiar with the story, it talks about Noah sending out birds from the ark to test to see if the waters had subsided. Right? So look on the left-hand side to the Epic of Gilgamesh to the bottom portion that I have underlined. It says, on the seventh day, I brought out a dove and set it free. The dove flew off, then flew back to the ship because there was no place to land. I waited, then I brought out a swallow and set it free. Okay, so in Genesis, right, chapter 8, verse 8, it says, also he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot, and she returned unto him into the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. Then he put forth his hand and took her and pulled her into the ark. So in both stories, Utnapishtim and Noah release a dove, right? The dove flies off, finds nowhere to land, and comes back, right? In both stories, right? Now, in Utnapishtim, he sends out a dove, a swallow, and a raven. In the Bible, Noah sends off a dove twice, and he also sends out a raven once. So you even have two of the birds similar doves. It's not even just birds. And the bird did the same. The dove did the same thing in both stories. The dove flew out, found nowhere to land because they were still flooded. The earth was still flooded, and came back to the ship. Right? Imagine that. What a coincidence. And so you see in the Epic of Gilgamesh on the right hand side, it says the swallow flew off, then flew back to the ship because there was no place to land. I waited, then I brought out a raven and set it free. The raven flew off, and because the water had receded, it found a branch. It sat there, it ate, it flew off, and didn't return. So in this version, the raven flies off, finds a branch, stays there, and then basically doesn't return. It finds a branch, right? Now in the story of the Bible, the story of Noah, it I'm sorry, it says in Genesis chapter 8, verse 10, and he stayed yet another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. So you see a bird being sent out again. And the dove came into him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. So in Utnapishtim, the raven flies off, he finds a branch, and he doesn't return, and this is the cue. Now, in the Bible, the dove flies off, finds the outer branch, and he brings it back, and Noah sees it, and this is the cue. But in both stories, you have another bird going out and finding some type of foliage, right? And this is the signal, right? And so now check this out. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, it says in the middle portion, when the waters had dried up and land appeared, I set free the animals I had taken. I slaughtered a sheep on the mountain top and offered it to the gods. I arranged 2 rows of 7 ritual vases. I burned reeds, cedar, and myrtle branches. The gods smelled the fragrance. They smelled the sweet fragrance and clustered around the offering like flies. Now, in the Bible, in Genesis, chapter 8, verse 18, it says, And Noah went forth, and his sons, and his wives, and his sons' wives with him, every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, and whatsoever creepeth upon the earth after their kinds, went forth out of the ark. And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast, and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake, blah, blah, blah. So now you have, when the waters abate, when the waters dry up, in both stories, right? The animals are let off the boat, the people come off the boat. Utnapishtim makes an offering to the gods, right? He makes some kind of an altar. He says he arranges 2 rows of 7 ritual vases. He makes like an altar, and he makes a burnt offering to the gods. The gods smell the fragrance and they like it. In the Bible, the flood waters go away. Noah gets off the boat, or the animals gets off the boat. Noah builds an altar, right? He makes a burnt offering upon the altar, and the Lord smelled a sweet savor. Just look at that, man. Look at that. In Utnapishtim, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, I set free the animals I had taken. In the Bible, verse 19, every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, and whatsoever creepeth upon the earth after their kinds went forth out of the ark. Epic of Gilgamesh. I slaughtered a sheep on the mountaintop and offered it to the gods. I arranged 2 rows of 7 ritual vases. I burned reeds, cedar, and myrtle branches. In the Bible, verse 20, and Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Epic of Gilgamesh. The gods smelled the fragrance, they smelled the sweet fragrance. In the Bible, verse 21, and the Lord smelled a sweet savor. Wow, wow, wow. I mean, that's something now, ain't it? So think about it, family. Think about all of those similarities that I just showed you, right? Think about all of those similarities that I just showed you. Okay, in both stories, you have an individual who encounters a flood. You have 2 flood stories. In both stories, God is the one who decides to send the flood. In both stories, a man, Utnapishtim and Noah, are told to build a ship because of this flood. In both stories, Utnapishtim and Noah, the men, are told to bring an example of every living creature onto the ship with them, right? In both stories, the great deep and the floodgates of heaven are open when the rain begins, right? In both stories, all the land is covered with water, right? In both stories, Utnapishtim and Noah send out 3 birds to test to see if the waters had abated. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, right, you have a dove, a raven, and a swallow. In the Bible with Noah's Ark, you have a dove, and a raven. So you have a dove and a raven in both stories. In both stories, the man, Utnapishtim and Noah, sends out a bird, the bird comes back, the waters haven't subsided. They send off a bird, the bird comes back, the waters haven't subsided, right? They send off a bird in Utnapishtim's flood, the bird gets a branch, brings it back, Utnapishtim knows the flood is over. In the Bible, the dove finds somewhere to land, doesn't come back, and that's how he knows that the flood is over, right? Oh, I skipped the part. When the waters recede, both ships land on a mountain. Utnapishtim's ship lands on a mountain, and Noah's ship lands on a mountain. I skipped over that. Okay, so they land on a mountain. They send out the birds, right? When the water subside, the men and the animals exit the boat with Utnapishtim and with Noah. The first thing that's documented that these individuals do, Utnapishtim builds an altar and makes a burnt sacrifice. Noah builds an altar and makes a burnt sacrifice. In Utnapishtim's flood, the gods smell the fragrance of his burnt offering, and they describe it as a sweet fragrance, and they cluster around it like flies. In the Bible, with Noah, he builds an altar, makes a burnt offering, and it says that the Lord smells the sweet savor. It's a sweet savor to him. It smells good, right? So think about that. Is Noah Utnapishtim, and is Utnapishtim Noah? Or is this talking about the same story? Did this did this is this story the same story, right? In the Epic of Gilgamesh and in the Bible? Is this the same story just retold a different way? Because those are a heck of a lot of similarities, family. Now, a lot of you may not have ever saw this, so I just wanted to document that. You can always go back, pause on some of those pages that I didn't read fully. You can read those, and remember, I didn't read the entire story, so you may want to just try to go download it, or you can just go and buy it. Like, I actually own the copy that's on the screen right now. I saw it and I bought it because I wanted to read the flood story for myself. I was actually shocked and surprised at the amount of similarities that I found. So I know it's some of you who are listening to this, when you just watched this video, you're shocked right now with the amount of similarities. So go back over this video, take some notes, write some of this stuff down so you can have some conversations with a few people. Um, yeah, is Noah a retelling of Utnapishtim? Because this was written before. Now, according to the biblical chronology, the flood happened before the time of Gilgamesh. It was before 21 BCE. So, from the mythological standpoint, someone may say that no, Noah is not Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim is Noah. But I don't see how one could say that this is not telling the same story. I mean, there are marked differences, right? There are marked differences, but it's so similar, right? It's so similar. I can't see how the writers of both stories, whichever one was written first or whatever story they're trying to convey, how both cultures were not aware of this story being told. To me, it sounds like a retelling of the same story. My assessment of it is that the Epic of Gilgamesh was going around, and they were, I'm going to leave the judgment up to the viewer. I'm not going to say what it is or what it isn't. I'm just going to let the information be presented. You can come to your own conclusion. Thanks for watching Gilgamesh and Noah, or are these the flood stories? Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Um, share this, comment. Find me on Facebook, Matthew Daniels on Facebook. Also have a Facebook group, The Real Bookworm, one word. Also have a Facebook page called Maze Art being one word. And just link up with me, reach out to me. Hotel, life, prosperity, health. Thanks for watching.